My name's Dr. Kate Strudwick. I'm currently the Dean of LOUT, Lincoln Academy of Learning and Teaching, whereby I provide leadership and strategic direction for teaching and learning across the university, and also lead the LOUT as a community of practice. So I wanted to take the time today to talk to you about where and how the alternatives and innovations are that we can move forward when we try and think about the future for teaching and learning, and also to illustrate some of the kind of case studies of good practice that we've got at Lincoln as well. So the plan for the session is to really kind of set the scene, talk about the current context a little bit, where we currently are and what the key drivers might be for us that are thinking about developing teaching and learning, reflecting on what we can do and where we can build on specific aspects and areas of good focus and practice, both for us as staff and also for students. In fact, all of us involved in higher education, the wider community. And I'd really like, in the time that we've got for questions, to get your thoughts on how we can move forward with this and push further with aspects of teaching and learning, aligning them with quality, student experience, student engagement, possibly coming to an observation that perhaps it's time that we are less risk averse and we need to be quite bold when we're leading in teaching and learning, which really links with what Liz Mossop was just saying in the opening part of the conference about we've now got choices, and it's probably time that we start to reflect on those choices and be quite bold in thinking about the way forward. So just setting the scene, I want to just talk through some of the changes and shifts, and a lot of these are just my observations about what's been happening over the last 2 years during the pandemic within higher education. We know there's been numerous examples of good practice, with all institutions moving their approaches to being flexible and adaptable, and that transition to more digitally enhanced provisions. And so when we're looking at the external drivers, we also know, and again, this is something that Liz alluded to in her introduction, about the level of uncertainty and confusion, one might say, about where and how we can move forward. So, for example, with waiting bated breath for what was happening with the Augar review, and also I think it's now a case of taking stock and thinking where and how we can move forward. I've got some headlines which I've just kind of put together, and I'm thinking these are my observations, so please, I'd like to hear of everyone else's thoughts in the time we have for questions. But some of the headlights that I think we've got, the first one is skills. And so what we have seen now is we've got those opportunities to make choices about where and how we address skills within higher education. And so one of these, we can look at the recommendation of the Augar report for a single lifelong learning loan, which was very much about looking at the post-18 education and thinking about further education as well. And it's just here I wanted to pick up a quote that Edward Peck, the Vice Chancellor from Nottingham Trent, had put in a recent wonky submission, where he said it feels as if higher education has been under constant review over the past 2 years. And I would agree with that, and anyone that's involved in kind of developing teaching and learning and also student experience would probably agree as well, which has meant that we have now got to a point where there's a level of uncertainty. However, the key focus for skills and kind of this lifelong entitlement is about really embracing flexible learning, quality provision, and modularity. And as exactly what Liz was saying in her opening introduction, that the fact that we can rethink how and when we are delivering and in what ways we're doing that with regards to higher education. Another headline that I wanted to pick up on was ways that we can widen participation. And so here I'd like to address the proposal to end the foundation years and really look at that as an area of concern, really, because when we're thinking about what foundation years actually provides, it's giving the kind of students that opportunity, that second chance, maybe even to be part of higher education. And so there's been kind of these external drivers and shifts that have been happening throughout higher education, which in some cases, and these again were just my kind of headlines, have led to a lot of institutions coming together, and that's where the collaboration element comes in. So if I refer to the HEPI blog by Chris Husbands, again, Vice Chancellor for Sheffield Hallam, who talked about the Policy Perspectives Network, where we're learning from each other. And it was there that 10 universities came together to frame alternative perspectives to policymakers about meeting these drivers and that collective importance of how we can meet this uncertainty. And so it could be opening up of pathways, learning from the lessons of how we can offer provision for those students that are underrepresented and widening participation, developing different platforms for learning. And this is where we're really looking at the lessons learned and where we can think bolder, perhaps, to try and address some of the outcomes and gaps that we've seen over the past few years, and think about values, think about the importance of innovations and where they have values for all with regards to the community within higher education. So thinking ahead, and before I move on to my next slide, I think it's fair to say, just as a general observation about setting the scene, that COVID-19 and working through that has really pushed higher education to expand upon our adoption of digital educational platforms. And where does this leave us? Well, to me, this leaves us about thinking about innovation and change, and I've put some questions and I say this is more kind of a set of observations and reflections that I wanted to kind of put forward and raise and signpost. As we return to the academic year, following working through the pandemic and lots of kind of working from home and on online provision, as higher education institutions, we really had to meet those challenges. And so we were learning lessons, which may require a bit of a change of mindset, as I've put there on the screen. What can we learn from enhanced use of digital pedagogy? We know pedagogy needs to come first, and we know that digital platforms are there as an enhancement, and they perhaps in the past we haven't used them to the best that we could have, let's say. But now we're in a different frame of mind, and so the opportunities to become much more collaborative, much more agile, much more adaptable, and we've shown that we can do this. And this is where we can be effective in those partnerships with digital education and obviously alongside students. I think also, what we've done at Lincoln is we've built upon the foundations, we've built upon student as producer, and we've started to think, when writing our new teaching, learning, student experience strategy, are we offering the right suite of programs? Do we need to rethink about provision? In fact, in that process, we went through the possibility to think about a 2-year degree, to think about different platforms that we could use, and obviously ensuring that all of this aligns with quality and value, and that's value for all involved as well. So what I wanted to do is bringing it together. Should we be more risk averse? And in order to look at this, I've kind of thought we need to reflect on what has worked and where we've done well, to show the significance of what we have achieved over the last 2 years or so. And for me, I've got a number of kind of just points that I wanted to address. So this is time for reflection, and I think we've embraced and I've signposted some of the areas which could be a core focus. We need to make sure we don't regress back to traditional, I was going to say pre-COVID, but we're still there, traditional ways of provision and approaches. We need to learn from lessons, and we need to take on board the challenges that perhaps they've arisen with regards to student engagement and participation, and also to be flexible. just as an example, is it time, and I want to say, to reassess our assessments and using the notion of TCAs and the not going back to what we had done previously. So, how we can start to really build upon those and think about framing them more within pedagogy and pedagogic models. Another way is also to think about some of the areas where that's been raised regarding mental health and the sense of belonging. And so this collaboration, bringing students back together when we're thinking about our provision and not going back to the old ways. The future might look different if, and I've got just a little list in front of me here. So if we think about the future, and this is just my take, to build upon the successes in terms of how we explain these, how we evidence these in terms of their impact, to take ownership and allow students to have a kind of collaborative role in that, a partnership role, so they're working on their journey. As a responsibility for us as higher education institutions to provide meaningful, quality, excellent teaching and learning, but one that isn't linear, that one that works within the discipline and is amenable and flexible. To actually be clear on how we explain this with language, with terminology, making sure we highlight the value for students, that sense of belonging and that holistic notion. So it's time to take stock. It's time to learn from the strengths that we've seen, and also from the challenges, pull together. And also this may be this change of mindset. It may be that we need to do this reassessment, redesign programs, think about more co-creation. But equally, and just to end, I think sharing is the best way that we can learn from good practice, and hopefully it's events like this and collegiality among the sector where we can get to that path. So thank you very much for listening, and I think we're now open for questions.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Kate. So if anyone does have any questions, if you'd like to raise your hand, I'll be able to work through the list of questions. We've got time for a few. Or comments. Okay, then, Kate, I'll get the ball rolling there. So could you tell me a bit more how you think we can collaborate with students while we're reflecting on these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've just stopped sharing my screen, just so I can see you, because I couldn't see you all then. I think, again, at Lincoln, and those of us that are here and work at Lincoln will know what I'm about to say about student as producer, and what we've done and what we conducted during the time over the pandemic really was a bit of a mapping exercise about where and how the interpretations of student as producer as a key institutional model regarding teaching and learning has been shown throughout different colleges. And so with the Lau led on this mapping exercise, and I just wanted to flag up that, there was different ways, and this is what I mean about it being adaptable and being, relevant to that discipline. So, for example, the College of Arts focused a lot on collaborating, showcasing with degree shows and kind of partnership productions. We also had in science, it was very much project-based learning. So they did things like Dragon Den events and industrial research opportunities offered students, so getting them involved in all aspects. Social science do a lot of work along service, so the law clinic, and they provide work placements and internships. And LIBS very much took a client-based model interpretation for student as producer, where they looked at real life problem solving and focusing on employability. As a university, in the summer of 21, we put on a Festival of Learning, which was very much about using that time between exams and kind of starting the summer to provide a number of programs and sessions where students took some of the delivery, where sometimes alongside staff. We looked at skills, we looked at academic, we looked at well-being, and we also ended on a live kind of social event. It was very much this opportunity bringing together one community and this notion of providing that meaningful. A lot of it was face-to-face, as some was digital as well, but for staff and students to get together. And so that's just one example where we were really kind of proactive in putting together that Festival of Learning to make that little slot of time really important for everyone.
Thanks, Kate. We are over time, but there are a couple of questions in the chat, whether you want to address those very quickly. One is about upskilling or CPD you might recommend for learning technologists.
Yep, and this is obviously where I think that when I say collaboration is working alongside, and Liz said this as well, with digital team there and digital education. So it would be making sure that it's a case of offering that to all, and I would say that would be for all members of staff, not just academics, that have any level of supporting students, and bringing in more digital platforms into there. So we have a whole stream of that, which digital education lead on, but obviously in collaboration with LOUT.
I don't know how quickly you can answer these two, but maybe take them over to the discussion board as well later if people want to.
Producer, yes, I think that's a challenge. Michael, meeting all of the ability. Yeah, I keep saying we want to make it inclusive and we want to involve all in the collaboration, but absolutely, I think that that's one of the challenges is how we can actually do that. And how do we do it without overwhelming students? I think, Lisa, at Lincoln, it's been embedded in all our programmes and all disciplines for the last 11 years. So I think it becomes almost just second nature here, I would say. And obviously, this is where students being first and being foremost has been at the front of all of our planning and development and delivery. So it doesn't overwhelm them because of this collaboration we have with the Student Union, for example, and obviously we get students involved in co-creation at all elements in and outside the classroom. So it just becomes how you do it.